You tapping in real quick. Something like nothing major, man. You know what I'm talking about? Just gonna chop it up real quick about this Jimmy versus Damon situation. And why everybody is so low on Jimmy and so high on Damon this week, for the most part. You know what I'm talking about? Like, listen, I get it. Jimmy didn't look great at all in any way, shape, form, or fashion in his last matchup against King. But let's also get something else straight. Damon is not King in any way, shape, form, or fashion on the feet in the striking department. He's not as fast. He's not as crafty. He's not as diverse. He is not King. Now I'm talking about one thing has nothing to do with the other, but it's all worth consideration. He's not going to go out there and do to Jimmy Miller what King did to Jimmy Miller. You know what I'm talking about? And Jimmy's, come on, man. In his last 5 fights, he's 3-2. In Damon's last 5 fights, he's 2-3. Damon has won a split decision and won via you know, flash knockout. When he cracked Pat, he also lost via knockout and he lost via decision twice. So in his last 5 fights, he's been knocked out and lost 2 decisions. He had the flash knockout over Pat and he won a split decision. You know what I'm talking about? In Jimmy's last 5 fights, he's lost 2 decisions and he has 3 finishes. He neck cranked Gabriel Benitez. He knocked out Jesse Butler and he guillotined Donald Cerrone. Before that, he knocked out Eric Gonzalez and he knocked out some. I mean, like it's not like Jimmy's just been falling off a fucking cliff. Jimmy's been who Jimmy is who Jimmy has always been. You understand what I'm saying to you? Jimmy puts on shows. Jimmy locks up, secures victories, finishes inside the distance, gets post-fight bonuses. You know what I'm talking about? And he catches L's. It's a roller coaster of a road. He's a OG. He's a vet. He's been around for a minute. And we can't keep judging these individuals off their last performance like, Damon's just going to come out here and do what Bobby King Green did to Jimmy Miller. In no way, shape, form, or fashion is that even a possibility. You understand what I'm saying to you? Damon is not that fast, not that crafty, doesn't cut them kind of angles, doesn't put out them kind of shots, doesn't put out that kind of volume. You know what I'm talking about? Doesn't utilize the octagon, doesn't move, doesn't have the mobility or the agility. He is not Bobby King Green in any way, shape, form, or fashion, man. You're talking about an individual who in his last 5 fights won a split decision and got a flash knockout over Pat. You put him back in there with Pat, that won't happen again, but it did happen. It is a nice win, and especially inside the distance to have on your resume, but let us not read too much into that. He has a bit of pop in his shots. He knocked out Pat, much like Davey Grant knocked out Jonathan Martinez. These kind of individuals like Damon Jackson and Davey Grant, like, you know, they have their moments. You understand what I'm saying to you? But there is nothing special about them. There is actually something very special about Jimmy, man. And it is all in his records, man. It is all in his records. Look at his resume and the records that he has set, the records that he is attempting to go out here and continue to raise the bar on. You understand what I'm saying to you? Jimmy is he's very solid. He's very well-rounded. He's very dangerous. They both have quite a few submissions underneath their belt. Jimmy has quite a few more, but that's because Jimmy has quite a few more fights, man. But to act like just because Bobby King Green came in there and looked absolutely magnificent and did Jimmy the way he did him, but still couldn't get him up out of there. Y'all want me to believe that Damon Jackson's all of a sudden gonna come in there and be Bobby King Green-esque, You know, I'm talking about utilizing the octagon, the mobility, the agility, the speed, the pop, the volume, the diversity in the striking department, the angles he's going to cut, the way he's going to be able to crack the head. Like, that's what Damon Jackson's going to come in here and do to Jimmy. Get the fuck up out of here. Make me a believer, man. And Jimmy's a hometown. With all the records Jimmy set, with the name that Jimmy has. You understand what I'm saying to you? This is Jimmy's hometown, man, in Madison Square Garden, man. Huh? What if Jimmy goes out here and puts on hands down one of his best performances, locks up a finish inside the distance via submission to just add to that motherfucking record and takes his gloves off, man, in Madison Square Garden in 2024 before we go into 2025 and just goes out on a high note in his hometown, in his backyard. Come on, man. And if this thing goes to the distance, it goes to the cards, and it's anywhere near highly competitive and closely contested, where it very well may be, but I still have Jimmy edging him everywhere, Jimmy's going to get the nod at Madison Square Garden, man. 9 times out of 10, in my personal opinion. You understand what I'm saying to you? So I get it. Individuals aren't necessarily that high on Jimmy right now because of what happened in his last performance. But why are we so high on Damon Jackson? He lost. Didn't he lose in his last performance too? Like, didn't he lose in his last couple performances? Like, why are we so high on this guy, man? He got the flash knockout over Pat. You know what I'm talking about? Then he was flash knocked out. And he lost the decision. Then he won a split decision. Then he lost the decision. Jimmy just lost the decision in brutal fashion to Bobby King Green. You understand what I'm saying to you? Prior to that, neck cranked Gabriel Benitez, knocked out Jesse Butler. You know what I'm talking about? Lost the decision. Guillotined Donald Cerrone. Knocked out Eric Gonzalez or whatever. I mean, like, huh? Jimmy's out here in his last 5 fights. He's got 3 finishes and lost 2 decisions. In this man's last 5 fights, he's got 1 finish, 1 split decision, and lost 2 decisions and been finished inside the distance. Why are we so high on this guy and so low on Jimmy when Jimmy's going to be some, you know, like Jimmy, Chris, John, Mickey, Bo? I mean, he's, especially Jimmy and Mickey, being out of Jersey, you know what I'm talking about, and John and Chris being out of New York. I mean, these are somewhat like hometown heroes in that area when we're talking about mixed martial arts and all of that, man. Like, the names that they have and to be fighting out of their backyards. How can we make the case for all of these individuals in Canada and all of these individuals over in Brazil or in Mexico and all these other places because they're fighting in their hometowns and this, that, and the third? And if it's highly competitive and closely contested, you got to think that more times than not, they're going to get the nod from the judge. How can that shit not apply over here? People very much so pick and choose where they want certain shit to apply. You know what I'm talking about? I'm not gonna fucking do that, man. Huh? Chris is that guy over here. All Chris has to do is keep this thing highly competitive, closely contested. I don't think anybody finishes this fight inside the distance. I don't think Eric Anders is finishing Chris. You know what I'm talking about? I don't think Chris is necessarily going to finish Eric neither. But the way Eric likes to implement his body of work won't necessarily work against Chris. He might get reversed and put up against the cage in his own right, or reverse swept and, you know, taken down in his own right, where Chris will secure top pressure, you know, top control, and work for what bit of ground and pound he can find and attempt to look for a submission or do what he has to do to get the ref from stop from standing him up and getting him out of that position, man. Like, I don't know where Eric Anders is really going to go out here and do a whole lot. There's not a big significant age difference. You understand what I'm saying to you? And when you talk about what Eric Anders has ever been able to do inside of any cage against anybody for any promotion, especially inside the UFC, how are we saying that any body of work Eric Anders has ever produced is that much more significant anything that Chris has been able to produce. You understand what I'm saying to you? And I know folk ain't high on him, the eye poke and whatever and this, that, and the third, but it is what it is, man. Everybody gets eye poked and everybody eye pokes somebody, man, for the most part. And we're all mad when we're on the other side of that eye poke. Yeah, I'm talking about, but it is what it is. Eye pokes happen, groin shots happen, these things happen, especially when jokers get a little bit more aggressive and reckless in their approach to try to find a finish or, make a significant, separate themselves significantly. You know what I'm talking about as far as on the points and all that, man, or at least in the judge's eyes, man. You know what I'm talking about? So I just don't get it in these situations. Like, what has Eric Anders done? You know what I'm talking about? He's got a youth advantage. He does not hold a wrestling or grappling advantage. I don't believe he holds a jiu-jitsu advantage if it makes it down to the mat and he found himself in a dominant position. I don't see him holding Chris down. I don't see him holding Chris against the cage. In those positions, in those situations, in those engagements, I see Chris reversing that shit and saying, thank you for coming into where, I'd much rather be right now. You know what I'm talking about? And grinding shit out, man. So I don't get it. I don't get it. And if it goes to the cards, it's Chris Weidman in Madison Square Garden, man. And, he's getting the nod more times than not, in my personal opinion, man. So I don't get it. But on the Jimmy situation with the Damon, I really don't get it. I really don't get it. Why are we so low on Damon and so low on Jimmy and so high on Damon? That shit makes absolutely no sense, man. Bat shit. It's Benini to me. Why? Isn't Damon coming off a decision loss? Just like, Jimmy is coming off a decision loss, a bit more of a brutal decision loss, but at least in his last 5 fights, he doesn't have a finish inside the distance via KO TKO loss. Damon has that on his record, and he has 2 decisions that he lost on them last 5. He won a split decision, and he won a flash knockout over Pat. You know what I'm talking about? Come on, man. Jimmy lost to Bobby. You know what I'm talking about? Then he lost to Old Boy that Damon beat via split. He lost to Old Boy via decision. But he won 3 finishes. Neck crank, knockout, guillotine. And before that, knockout, some more knockouts, guillotines, neck throw. Like, come on, man. Come on, man. What the fuck would Damon have looked like that night in there against that Bobby King Green? Let's talk about that. If we're going to talk about how bad Jimmy looked in his last matchup with Bobby King Green on that night, the way Bobby King Green showed the fuck up, let's talk about how the fuck Damon would have looked. Damon would have got finished. Damon wouldn't have made it the full 15 minutes. Damon wouldn't have went the distance. Damon would have got handled inside the distance. Bobby King Green would have gave him that business. He showed up just King that night. King would have gave him that business, man. He'd have put that work on him. Huh? He'd have beat the fucking brakes off of him. Damon wouldn't have been able to take it, and he'd have put him to sleep, man. You know what I'm talking about? In my personal opinion, man. He couldn't get Jimmy out of there. Jimmy went to a decision, and he lost it. But come on, man. What is so special, magnificent, or what about the body of work that Damon's been producing is that much more significant about what's on the Jimmy side of things, man? Absolutely nothing to me. You know what I'm talking about? Make me a believer. I think we're going to get prime time Jimmy. I think Jimmy going to show up to show out and show off and possibly take them gloves off and go out on a high note if he's able to secure yet another finish inside the distance. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. Word. And the Chris situation, it just is what it is. This was about Jimmy, though, because I don't fucking get that. You know what I mean? The Chris situation, maybe I can get him being an underdog, but I can't wrap my head around him losing. Eric Anders is going to have to go out there and knock him out. Eric Anders is going to have to go out there and implement a heavy volume, heavy striking game and stay away from the clinch exchanges and up against the cage, because I don't think he's going to win those exchanges. You know what I'm talking about? I don't think he's going to win those exchanges, man. Again, that's just all my personal opinion, and this was really all about, Jimmy. So I'm with Jimmy, obviously. You know what I'm talking about? I don't get it. Damon going to have to make me a fucking believer. I know Jimmy's at the end of it, but I don't care where we find Jimmy at. I don't think Damon's that guy, man. Nothing about anything he's done shows me that he's that guy in any way, shape, form, or fashion, or that he should even be a favorite. You know what I mean? Huh? 2-3 in his last five, 3-2 in his last five, 3 finishes on his wins, 1 split decision on his wins. He's been finished in his losses. I don't get it, but it is what it is. Appreciate y'all for tapping in. Peace and blessings.